You better turn up. You better be there when I shake. Watch me rocking if I can't stop. If I should fall, just go ahead. Go and catch me, baby. Ooh, I live it. That's my choo-choo-ah. Ooh, I love it. Crank it up, yeah, yeah, yeah. Turn it up on a higher level. Turn it up, we got this.
Break it down like this.
You better grab that tambourine. Bring the bass, we might be wicked. We may be forced to cause a scene. Make some trouble, baby. Ooh, I live it. That's my choo-choo-ah. Ooh, I love it. Crank it up, yeah, yeah, yeah. Turn it up on a higher level. Turn
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic lights. And I really wanna know if I will ever figure out where the road goes.
Audio helps. Yo! My thing didn't kick over. Ugh. And today is a day. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear us now. We just had issue upon issue this morning. I am Adam, and I am joined by...
I'm Patrick.
Patrick?
Woo.
We're happy that you can make it today. I was saying in the chat... Oh, man. Oh, it did go away. Okay, cool. Saying in the chat, we skip 1 week, and everything falls apart. So, welcome, everyone. If you are new to Guy in a Cube or just new to this live stream, put hashtag new in the chat. We want to see how many new folks are here today. It's always nice to see that and see new faces and folks joining us from around the world. Abanov, I think I pronounced that correctly. Welcome. Thomas, Classical BI. Nice. Sven, nice to see you. Very cool. It's always great to see new folks. Right, Patrick?
Yes, always,
Yeah.
always, man. I'm stuck on something. So anyway.
Yeah. All right. So getting into this a little bit. So we got much more Foodie Guy. Welcome, Foodie Guy. Glenda, Akil, Anamali. Awesome. Shiva, new from the Netherlands. Awesome. Good to see the Netherlands here. Templar, good to see you. Kamish, thank you for becoming a supporter. Yeah, Rishi and Kevin. Oh, Kevin, good you're here. I was gonna shout you out here in a minute. So, all right. So Jessica's asking in the chat also if you can just put like where you're from in the chat as well. She's trying to put together a map of where everyone's from. So it doesn't have just countries fine. If you want to put more than that, awesome. So good to see everyone. Kelly, welcome. So, all right. Next up, just want to give a big shout out to all of the members that are here. So you'll see them in if their name says green, that means they're a member. So just thank you for that. It helps support Guy in a Cube and what we do here. It is very much appreciated. And if that's something you wish to partake in, you don't have to, but there's a join button down below on the YouTube channel that you can go ahead and do that. So it's very much appreciated. All right. Patrick, you look troubled.
Oh, no.
No? All right. And then for those curious about how we do the live stream and how it looks the way it does, so this is my setup of the gear that I'm using on my end. It is referred to as the banana setup. And then Patrick's setup is less complicated, but still awesome. And we will be upgrading him a little bit. We're waiting on his Go XLR to get in, hopefully August. It's back ordered right now. So that is that. All right, hang on. So Crystal's saying she can still hear the music. That is intentional. Is it too loud for folks? Let me know. Okay, cool. All right. All right. Everyone's saying it's fine. Good. It should be lower volume, but it's still playing. Excellent. Yeah, Patrick, did you know that Micah's in Dallas, Texas? I didn't know that until earlier this week. That is amazing. All right. So first up, what we're going to do, we have a holdout. We had switched the membership levels and whatnot. We had an old set, what we originally set up with, and then we switched over to the new setup. And the highest tier, what we did originally was we said we would review your report on a live stream, and then we ended up changing gears. And so we asked folks who was on that tier, like, if you still want us to do that, this is your last chance. Kevin Griffin had actually reached out to us and asked us to do that. This was I don't know, month and a half ago, and it took us a little bit to get to it, but we are going to go look at his report here on the live stream as first up before we get into the questions, and then after that we will get into the questions. And so we're going to take some time to go through this a little bit. So Patrick's going to start with the data model. I think we're going to probably spend the most time there, and then I'll make some comments on the report itself from a design perspective. So, you ready, Patrick?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. You want us to cut over to your machine, or?
Head over to my machine. Let's
All
head
right.
over to my machine.
All right. Wait. How do
Let me know when you can see
I?
my machine.
There we go. All right, we are in.
Can you see it?
I can see it. You're
Can
a
you
little
see it?
soft again.
Is my mouse moving? Am I soft again?
Yeah. Everyone, is Patrick's audio level okay? We had a little issue earlier this morning. I thought I got it set up, but say something.
I'll
Talk,
just bring
Patrick.
the mic.
Talk,
Say-
Patrick.
I'm talking right now.
Okay.
Just
Let me know if he's. James says he's fine. Info says good. All right. Go forward.
All right. Okay. So, I mean, the very first thing that I saw when I looked at this model is if you take a look at some of the tables, there's some of them that I think should be fact tables, and I'll explain what I mean in a little bit. But if you look across some of these, there's key columns and the values within some of these very wide tables that I think, Adam and I talk about this a lot about making star schemas. And I think you got to step back a little bit in this model and kind of focus in on where the facts and the dimensions are. And I have a write-up over here, and maybe we'll share the write-up with him later, Adam. But one of the things you should focus on, and there's like 3 items in this write-up, kind of step back, take a look at these tables. If I go to, I think it was drug testing. Yeah, this is the one where you could see the test status, the test type, and all this. These things are probably dimensions. A lot of this stuff is it's dimensions within these tables where you're going to do the analysis of it, because you're trying to see how many people received this and how many people did that, and if somebody showed up for this. And so looking at this, that was the first thing I noticed, Adam, is that we need to strip this out and kind of make a true start schema out of it. But you got to take a step back. The next thing I saw which was interesting, and you and I talked about this this morning actually before the live stream, is if I connect this model up to DAX Studio and I go to Advanced and choose View Metrics. Okay, there we go. You'll see that there are some RI violations, some referential integrity violations. Did a video on blank, why are there blank values in my slices? And it kind of leads into this. And so there's a video over there on my whiteboard about doing a video on referential integrity violations. And so Adam actually pointed this out. He was like, man, I noticed this, and there's several of them. I've changed the model a little bit and reduced them, and I'll talk about what I did. But when you see these, that means there's, in the table that's on the mini side, typically the fact table, there's some values in that fact table that's not in the corresponding lookup table. So you got some bad data there. And while Power BI, Power BI allows you to make that relationship, it'll surface things like that. And more importantly, the engine can't take advantage of some of the optimizations built into the engine when you have these RI violations. And so I know what you're thinking. How do I find the columns that have these RI violations? In the blank video, why is my slicer blank video, I showed you can go into, let me show you. You can go into your, you can go into the report, and then you bring the key values in. So like this is the key value from I think the offenders table. Let me see. This is from, the offenders table. This is the dimension table. And then there's a fact table that is cases. And if you'll see the blank in the slicer, and then I can see it, all those blank values, right? These are the ones that don't exist in the lookup table, in my offenders table. There's an easier way to do this if you're okay with writing a little DAX. So if you use DAX Studio and connect to the model, there's a DMV that you can run. So I'm going to run this. Let me run this, Adam. And it gives me the exact same results that the
Can you zoom in?
DAX Studio Vertipack. Yeah, sure. That Vertipack analyzer gives you, but it gives me a little more because it's talking about table IDs and column IDs. And if I dig into the DMVs a little more, I can actually construct a query in DAX, so I can compare, the values in my cases table to the value in my offenders table. And if I run this query, it's going to show me all the values that don't exist in my lookup table. So I can construct these tables. I can construct this DAX and look across all those tables that have RI violations and look at those key values and try to figure out why they don't exist. How do I fix them? The bottom line is you got to go fix the data, right? Bad data in, bad results out. So you need to go and fix your data. And then I went through each page of the report. I really did. And I created some models based on each page of the report. And the good thing about it was most of them were star schemas, with the exception of a few things. So like, for example, events appears to filter most of these tables, right? It's like a dimension. So one event can be associated with multiple supervisions. And then the date table was related to everything. We'll talk about the date table in a little bit. And so if you go across most of these, they turned out to be some star schemas with a little snowflaking. This one really confused me because there's a many-to-many relationship. And I was able to create a one-to-many on both sides. And I was like, what's going on with this data? So between interview summaries and jail interviews, I really didn't know how to resolve that many-to-many relationship. And that's something you need to look at because the data is kind of curious. But there was one, I think it was assessments. Let's go to assessments. Assessments was a true star schema. It was a true star schema. So whenever you start designing your data model, it's not saying you're going to have one fact table. There's no guarantee in a data warehouse you're going to have one fact table. It's likely, especially with this model, you'll have multiple fact tables. You'll have assessments, you'll have drug testing, you'll have, court hearings. All of those are facts because you're seeing if people attended their court hearings, if people had their assessments done. Those are the fact tables. But if you look at this one was great. When I built this one out, there's just a lot of, I think, unnecessary columns across a lot of these that you probably can eliminate because they're duplicated across the tables. The big example was with drugs. And so there was a page on drugs here, and I made a different model for it. And you'll notice, if you take a look at this, I'm going to zoom in because I want to show you. If you look at drug and drug testing, hang on one second. I'm going to put these side by side because these are the two I want to talk about. If you look at these two tables, right? Child ID, go away. Child ID exists there. CHIC exists here. Event exists. Most of the columns, except for these three columns, right? These three columns right here don't exist on this drug testing table. And I'm assuming this is more granular than that one. What you probably want to do is combine these into a single table. You want to combine these into one single flat table, and then you would, kind of have your star schema. Just a lot of work that could be done. And then something else I noticed, Adam, this one was really interesting. If we go back to advanced and go to view metrics for this, and you go to columns, if you look at is this not the right one? Let's sort this by percentage. There we go. Come on back. There we go. The dates table. Look at this. Look at the dates table. The very first one was 57%.
Wow.
Of the database itself.
Yep.
And I was like, why is it 57%? But when I went back and looked at the actual code for the date table, come on, show me the code. Show me the code for the date table. Because he used DAX, which I liked because I'm infatuated with DAX. But he used calendar auto, right? And there's nothing wrong with calendar auto, but calendar auto will scan the entire model for all the dates and then set the minimum and the maximum value. And my guess is that it went back and it found some value back in 1800, some value as far as 2300. And now you have this huge table with all these values in it. And you probably need to be more precise as opposed to using calendar auto. Maybe you use calendar and figure out when is the start and end of the data in this model to kind of reduce the size of that. Not that this is a very large model, but I like to be very meticulous, take a very slow baby step approach when I'm designing my model. And, I'm only importing what I need, only materializing what I need in the model. So
one thing I'll add there too is on the calendar auto. If you do want to use calendar auto, you can use some filtering to get it. Like if you base it on a column, like on your fact table that is your date range, filter down the calendar auto to the min and max of that, or something of that nature, right? or just use the calendar function and you can do min-max there to try and control it dynamically. So just doing flat out calendar auto can sometimes lead to that bloat on the calendar table.
It could be tricky. I like it. The bloat on the calendar.
Bloat.
It could be tricky. So just a few things, right? There's like 6 or 7 things that I ran into, and that I guess we'll bundle this up and send it to him or something, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yep. All right.
Cool.
You,
All right.
you got some stuff.
I do want to talk about the reports itself here real quick. So let's jump over to my machine. All right, so a couple things here. First off, in full disclosure, Kevin went through our blueprint course. So it's like a beginner course for learning Power BI. So thank you for that, Kevin. And so he took some of the backgrounds that we had in our reports and repurposed them for his. But the thing that stands out right away is it's not like a cohesive kind of flow to it, right? It looks like it doesn't really fit. And so the backgrounds that we created in that course were specific to the layout that we did in that course itself, right? So like these it just doesn't really seem to have a flow to it from page to page. So one thing I would recommend, and what we did in our course, was the first thing I did was we laid out the visuals where we wanted it. Then I took a screenshot of that, and then you can go into something like PowerPoint. I did it in Photoshop. And I generate the background based on where my visuals are actually located. So that way it like the actual background fits like what you're trying to do, as opposed to you taking a background that wasn't designed for it and putting it in the back, and then it kind of looks a little weird. So definitely, an easy way to do this is just in like if you have PowerPoint or something like that, or whatever Google's answer to that is. You can go in and create like some of those backgrounds or create some of that visual separation. The other thing I'll call out too is if you go to Power BI tips, I know they've got, where is it? Layouts. If you go to shop and then layouts, they've got a bunch of different layouts that you could pull down from there. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, but you could definitely go and get those items as well. So that may be something that can inspire you to come up with a layout that works for you in your situation. The other thing I'll say too is that the visuals themselves, so I like that you're trying to do some grouping here of items, but pay attention to consistency in terms of how your visuals are looking. So an example of this is on the monthly hearing overview. So some of these have the border enabled, others don't, and it kind of looks a little weird. So if you're going to go with a certain style, try and keep consistency in that style across the other visuals that are in your report, and even from page to page, right? So try to make sure that you're keeping that from page to page. One thing I'll call out, I know Patrick likes pie charts, and donuts are just a pie chart with a hole in it. But so like this use of a donut or pie chart is very clear, right? So we only have 2 items, and it's very easy to see kind of what those are. The other thing I like that you did is you also included the percentage as part of the data label, which is good because now I can not just rely on trying to visually understand where these are, but I can actually see the representation of the data as well. So that is good. But when I come to, there was one I saw that was so this one, yes, I have the data labels here as well, which is great. But as I start going through, so like visually, like I know these 2 are equal, so they're both 10%, but had I not had the data labels, I wouldn't have necessarily been able to visually spot that, right? So maybe one was 11% and one was 10, but I can't tell that visually. So the more items that you have in here, the harder it's going to be to decipher what the actual meaning of this is. Whereas, if you go with something like a bar chart or something of that nature, you can go and be able to more visually tell like where things are. So that's the challenge with pie charts and donut charts, is just being able to decipher what that data actually is. So just be aware of that. What else here? So then we've got this mix of a table. So one thing also notice is like the tables aren't, your visual alignment in here also is, it just feels like they're kind of scattered. And so try and One thing to really pay attention to on report design, and I'll free to admit I am not like an expert on report design, but I do work with a couple guys that are, and so I pick up a few things here and there. The thing to pay attention to is the flow of your data, right? So the flow of where your eye is going to do. So you want to tell a story, so try to make sure that you're leading them. One thing to be aware of is, so like your eyes are generally going to go up to the upper left first, depending on what you have that's going to catch your eye. And so just try and figure out like where your eye is going to scan, and that's where you want to put your important items. And so a quick way to do that is either one, get someone that you're working with or someone in your house to just say, hey, what did you look at first, right? Do a test. And or just go to the page and just try and mentally be aware of like, where did my eye go first? And that's probably where you want to put the most important piece of data that you're trying to communicate, and then go from there. Right. So try and use that as your guiding of where your visuals are going to go. One thing I do like about these though is that you're not. Some of these are a little done. Like this is very busy, but you have other items here where there's not like a whole lot of items here, and I do like that. So trying to minimize what you're trying to do to tell that story, and not like just overwhelm the report consumer itself. So those are things to pay attention to as well. And it looks like the theme that you're using is the default theme, so that's good. But try and figure out what your color palette is, align your backgrounds to that, and try and have a consistent color and feel to that. The other thing from a color perspective is do a little research on accessibility, because that is important. And you may know like who's actually looking at the report, but I would argue a lot of times you don't necessarily know what challenges people may have, whether it's color blindness or contrast issues, things of that nature. So like an example of contrast here is this background here. It's kind of like a light gray, but it kind of bleeds into the white area as we're going in from visuals from the two. So this could be hard to separate for some people. So that's why sometimes having the border there is good. Or if you're actually designing an actual background image, you can create that separation in terms of contrast from that background image itself. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So, all right. Anything else, Patrick, that you spotted?
You know what was great though? What was great about the entire report was that it was simple. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
And so you look at most of the pages, I don't know much about the data, but after just kind of looking through the reports, I understood what he was trying to accomplish, the questions he was trying to answer, just by looking at, the reports, because there's not that many elements on it. It just wasn't flooded with millions and millions of visuals. So that was like, wow, this is spot on, right? Just a little work spent on the back end. Somebody put a good comment. Star isn't perfect. A star schema is not perfect because you're going to have multiple facts and things like that. But just a little work on the back end, and I think this will be a phenomenal solution.
Yep. So Kevin, hopefully that helps you out with some things. I know it's not like there's probably other things we could have mentioned, but that's just some general tips on both the data model and the visual side of it. And I would even say on the visual side, just spend a good 15-30 minutes on that, just thinking about it a little bit, and that will really help take it to the next level. So awesome. Yeah. All right. Fernando said, tell him a bad thing as the devil's advocate. So I thought Patrick did a good job of that. I did call out some things as well. So
yeah, back up. So Fernando, he needs to back up really, and I think Kevin heard this at the beginning. Just back up with the data model a little bit, because if you look at, I'm not gonna go back to, but if you look at it, it's a busy data model. Yeah. And we can normalize it with having the fact tables as a center. So understanding that drugs and interventions, assessments and things, those are the center of the universe, and then you have all those little peaks around it with his dimensions. So I think he got it though. So we did talk about some bad things.
So I will be honest as well. When I first opened up, and I told Patrick this, I told Kevin this as well. When I first opened it and I looked at the data model, I'm like, whoa, like, So we were actually going to look at doing this in our last live stream, and I looked at that data model, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to need more time. And I had to go back to Kevin, and I had to get more information on the data model, right? Because it wasn't obvious, because it was kind of the way it was structured. It was not obvious, like what we were trying to do. And then he came back with some more detailed information, which was absolutely helpful, giving us a little more context. But yeah, the data model was, we had to take a step back on that. No, Kevin, don't be sorry, man. It's a
But it
learning
was great
experience,
feedback, right? The write-up,
Yeah.
the write-up he gave us gave me
Yes.
the insight I needed to provide the feedback. So no, it was perfect.
Yeah,
It was
don't be
spot on,
sorry.
Kevin. That
Don't
was
be
good.
sorry.
That
This
was
is
good.
all a learning experience,
Yeah,
man.
that was awesome.
And I would even say as we go through this too, that helps us think more about some of those items as well, and maybe investigate a little more of like, okay, how do we actually go about looking at that? So it's a learning process for us as well. So Raghunathan made a great comment too. The new shadow feature helps in background delineation. So on the images now, you can do like that background shadow or the shadow feature, the drop shadow. However, Patrick's gonna
Can I say something? Can I say something here?
Yeah.
So, if you guys have been watching all my recent videos, I use a drop shadow in every one of them. In fact, I just recorded a couple of videos the other day, and I got drop shadow, and somebody commented, "It's like that's so 1999," and it hit me in the heart a little bit. And I talked to Adam. He's like, "Don't take it personal." I was like, "Okay, man, I won't take it personal." But he's like, "1999. I think the drop shadow is so cool. I like it. I like it a lot." But anyway, just my preference.
That's because you're old school.
You hurt me. Hit me right here. Yeah. I am old school.
Well, but I've seen too, like even in some of the some of the visual backgrounds that I've seen, and you look at other reports that actual designers make, they do make use of shadowing because it does help with that separation. It may not be as I think the default shadowing drop shadow that's in Power BI desktop, I think it's a little over the top. Like it could be pulled back a little bit and maybe not so like in your face. Little bit goes a long way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all good.
I am old school, right? I am old
Patrick
school.
is old
I grew
school.
up in the 90s. Yeah.
All right. So now on to the questions. We've got a bunch of questions queued up. Thank you to Crystal, or affectionately named Chatmaster C, which Patrick, I think we need to actually get like a plaque made for her office and like Chatmaster C right above her desk. That'd be cool.
Right above our desk.
All right, so let's start off. ComInfo. Is there a roadmap methodology for site assessment from license purchase to full Power BI deployment? So one thing I will call out here. Let me go. And I found that, let me know in the chat. I got to think about what I'm typing here. Let me know in the chat if you're have not been aware of this. But out on the, where is it? Out on the Power BI YouTube channel. Let me go ahead and switch over to my machine, and we'll get rid of that. Why don't I see? Here we go. There is this Power BI adoption framework playlist that is out there. Let's go there. Yep. And this has a bunch of stuff that you can go through. There's a bunch of videos. I think they're adding some more. And you can go through to look at like a lot of how do you govern like frameworks to think about, from licensing, deployment, how to secure things. So it does touch on licensing as well. So that may be something that that may help you in that journey. So let me do that. And so that's something that you can do. And then ComInfo, I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say take a look at that also. There are some items that are going to be going out. There's an enterprise deployment white paper that's out on, if you go to the Power BI documentation, there's a link to that. That talks about some items as well. And then I know for the adoption framework, there's some work going on to try and get some written, documentation on the guidance section of the Power BI docs as well. So that'll be coming down the road. So hopefully that gets you going. Good question. So Chris Wagner, Chris, buddy, good to see you. How do you track ideas for all the videos that you do?
On my whiteboard. I write them down on my whiteboard.
So we actually, I have a Trello board where we've got a bunch of ideas. Patrick never looks at that. and but I would also say, like, we've got a ton of backlog items that are in there. I know a lot of people give us suggestions for videos. I stick them in there. Generally, though, when we do, like, we were even talking about, I think yesterday, of like, all right, what videos are we going to do next week? So some of it has to do with what we're excited about, what we've been dealing with in the last week or two. Sometimes the items that we face come up multiple times during a week. I've always commented, even when I was in support, working on cases and from doing the video thing, like, things come up in themes. So usually a given week will have the same issue crops up like 3 to 5 times. And so if we identify that, I'm like, all right, I'm making a video on that. So we do have a list of items that we go through, and we try to like map those out. But generally, if something comes up during the week that's just piquing our interest and we're getting a lot of questions, that just kind of shortcuts it, and that's the video that we're going to do. So
things get pushed back. Or somebody will see something, or even on a live stream, or somebody will post a question on one of the videos, and I go, "Fool, I was gonna do this video, but I think this was better." You know, so it is. I don't know. It's random sometimes. Believe it or not, it is random.
So the other thing too is that in those list of items that we have, like, we may go back and look at it, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that was really exciting at the time I put it in the list, and now it's like, I don't care about that now. Like, that's not really as important. Or we may go back and look at that list and be like, all right, well, that was important at the time, but they just released a new feature that just wipes that out. So
wipes it out. So
yeah. And then Chris asked,
Chris.
So he asked if the Trello board was public. It is not. So that is not a public board. So, because we've got other stuff in there as well. So, so good question though. All right, Rishi, can you elaborate on some of the new features announced in the new release wave? IG, the use cases for dynamic query parameters. So thank you for bringing that up. Let me go back to my machine, and we'll look at. So if you're not familiar with, what?
I'm sorry, Paul Nesson said, should we be using Microsoft Planner for all this?
Sure.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. I've actually used Planner, and I will say that from a personal preference, I like Trello better. But yes, I did try Planner. I did try it, or the To Do, or whatever it is. Release wave. So I'm just going to put that in the chat. So what I've pulled up is the release. We just released, Microsoft just released the 2020 Release Wave 2 plan. And so you can see items that are listed for this is given for semesters. So this actually states that this is for October 20th through March 2021, right there. So that's kind of the time frame for this. And then you'll see a list of items that's separated out by feature area, and then what they're actually planning on working on and the timelines for those items. The item in question is this user editing of dynamic query parameters. And so today you can create parameters inside of Power Query, and then those are only related at processing refresh time. So a lot of people ask for like end user type capabilities. Hey, can my end user change the parameter and it affected? And the answer today is no. What this feature, and I'm just going off of the description that's here, what this feature is going to do is that when you're in a direct query mode, so this won't work for import, but for direct query, those queries are issued at runtime as people interact with visuals. And so you'll be able to associate a parameter with a given item, and that parameter can then be used to affect the query. So like if you filter on a given item, that can then pass through from a query folding perspective, and then that will affect the results. So in that case, the parameters can actually then be used dynamically to affect the data that's coming back. So how that's actually going to be implemented and what the actual experience is going to be, I don't know. It's not out yet. But that's something that's pretty exciting. But just, I would definitely recommend, this is the roadmap for Power BI. So take a look and see some of those items that are coming down. Take a look at the timeframes of when those are coming. And then you can just understand what's going to happen. The other thing to realize about these release waves is these do get updated occasionally every once in a while. Sometimes things will get pushed out a little bit. New things will get added. So like one thing I'm not seeing here right now is anything for Power BI embedded. or yeah, Power BI embed's probably the biggest one that's missing here. So hopefully that'll get added at some point. And so just take a look at this, check out what's there. You can also go back to the wave 1. We're still in wave 1 right now. So you can check out those items. So
I don't see anything for Power BI report server here. That's a big one. Okay, I digress.
Power BI report server. Don't get chat started on that. So, Kevin, thank you so much for the super chat. And it was our pleasure to go ahead and do that as well. Holy cow! Look at that!
Yes.
Wow! Thank you, Kevin. I just looked at the amount. I didn't even notice the amount. Holy cow! Thank you. So it was our pleasure. Our pleasure. So hopefully, I know you said you did get value out of that. So I'm happy to hear that. So thank you so much. That is amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
All right. All right. So we did that. Rishi, hopefully that answered your question. I don't know. So Bala asked a question. Can you please provide a simple example for all except function in DAX?
Show my screen.
Okay. All right.
Show my screen. Show my screen. Show my screen. Show my screen.
I think Patrick might have been ready for this.
It's, all except, and most of it, if you talk to Marco about this, right? I actually chatted with him about all except before. You showing my screen?
Yeah.
So basically, it removes the filter context for every other column besides the one that's there. So if you take a look at this measure that I created, right? Let me zoom. Is that good enough, or should I zoom in?
A little more.
Okay, let's go a little right there. What about that?
Cool.
And so you can see I'm saying calculate, and then set the filter context on everything. Change the filter besides only apply it to customer, except customer. And so if you take a look at this table that I have, these two tables, right? I have two columns in that table. I have customer ID and customer, and you can see that my value is being filtered in this table for customer because I said filter everything, only filter customer, but don't filter customer. That's the only one I want the filter to be applied to. And so you can see that it just gives me the total for all of the customer IDs, but it actually breaks it down for each individual customer because I said in my calculate all except customer. Apply the filter context for everything. I mean, don't apply filter context for anything but customer. So there you go. That's it.
Nice. So there was a comment about page 326. I'm assuming that page number is for this book. So if you don't have this book, check it out. Lots of great stuff in here. You can play around with that. But also, I think Marco or Alberto, they did a video / article on that as well. So definitely check that out too on SQLBI.com.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. BJ. Oh, and also Sandeep, thank you for becoming a supporter. Much appreciated. And then, all right, BJ. I forgot to do this, Patrick. All right. So I'm going to do something new here. So for the questions, when I read them, I'm going to have a different voice.
Boy.
So we have this. All right, here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go, VJ.
Analyze option on desktop visuals is still in preview and is not working on a few charts. What could be the reason?
No, don't do that. I don't like it. See, no way. Everybody's
way.
like, no way.
What?
Since your audio is broken, fail.
That makes me sad. So
no.
but funny only once. Wow.
Yes.
Makes me sad. I was so excited for that. Okay. So the analyze option on desktop visual. So the specifically, I think, are we looking at like some of those options? First off, are all right, you guys.
Crystal said that was your real voice.
So VJ, something to be aware of though is that sometimes it depends on the visual type that you're using. It also depends on sometimes what you're using for like the rows and columns and the axis and items. So it's going to be dependent on what you're actually trying to do. So I don't, without more details, I don't know that we're going to be able to answer more than that. So were you going to do something?
No,
Patrick?
no.
Okay.
I mean, it is. No, you're right. You're right, man.
Yeah.
You run into it where it works, it doesn't work, and you're
Yeah.
trying to figure it
Sometimes
out.
it's a little
Absolutely.
confusing.
Absolutely.
So,
It is a little
yeah.
confusing.
So your
It a
mileage is
little
going to vary
confusing.
on that. I don't know off the top of my head, like off the top of my head, I don't know what the limitations are of like where and when that's going to kick in. So I'd have to go look and see if it's in the documentation. I do know though that it is dependent on the visual as well as some of the data that you're using. So like in some of them where it's like explain the difference, like it has to be a specific data type or type of measure that you're using. So it's not going to work on everything. So be aware of that. So,
Yep.
so sad, Patrick. All right. Zakir. I won't do the voice again. I'm sorry. Is there a way to put row level comments that users can add, edit on a table or matrix visual in Power BI? I need to explain variance or have others in my team explain the variance. So the short answer to that is no. The long answer to that is going to be maybe. So you're not going to be able to do it directly in the visual, first off. What you could do is potentially do something like an embedded Power App, or you could use the commenting feature on that's actually there for reports and dashboards if you wanted to. So that's a way that you could do some of that information. I think so. Patrick, you got a visual, or you have a video as well talking about some of the report level tooltips that you could pass in that filter context.
That's what I was thinking.
And dynamically build just the explanation of some of that. It's not going to allow for feedback though, like people to edit that or comment back on that. But that's something you could look at as well.
Well, you gotta use a Power App, right?
Yeah.
If you want to write back, right? You plug a Power App into it. Depending on how you set it up, it can be real time, but you got to use direct query. If you're okay with that data refreshing later, then you can keep it in import mode and write back to your source. And whenever the refresh happens, it will display it. And then you combine that with maybe a visual header tooltip to actually display what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do it in the context, then you need to just do a report tooltip.
So,
but it's a combination of things.
Another thing to be aware of too is that, and I don't know if that was on the plan there. I know it was showed at MBAS. There is some, they're working on the natural language generation feature that will explain certain things based on context. So that's something to keep your eye on. I don't see it in the release wave 2. So that is, but that's something to be aware of that could potentially help you in that area as well, is where it'll naturally generate the text based on the fields and the filter context and things of that nature to help explain the difference. So Kelly had a comment too, because we mentioned Power Apps. She made a comment, is there a good source for embedded Power App? I know Patrick you did a video a while back on that.
I did.
So we do have a video on it. I don't have it on hand. But if you search for Power App on our YouTube channel, you'll find where he actually goes through an example of how to do that. Also check out, I don't know if he has a specific video, but Shane Young's does a bunch of Power App videos as well, and he may have something as well in terms of how to do that embedding. So you can check that out as well. Cool. All right.
So let's see. So Alt Enter, right? She said she did something recently using the bookmark for the input thing. I did recently using a bookmark and put in a text box behind each visual. I use a button to toggle to that metadata. I'm interested. I'm curious. You piqued my interest.
And I know what you're talking about. The thing I would caution on that is a way you could do it. The thing I would caution on is depending on how many visuals you have, that's going to require a bunch of buttons and a bunch of bookmarks. And then you got to keep all those updated and like in sync. And it can get depending on what you're doing. If it's just for like one visual, like that may be good. If it's for like 20 visuals, that could get messy really fast. And if you're doing that on multiple pages, that could add to a lot. So just be aware of that you could get into a management nightmare with going that approach. So, but it's a good suggestion though. Something to consider. Okay. Let's get rid of that. All right. Shiva. How can I implement incremental refresh on SAP BW BEX queries? Should the query have date time column to implement incremental refresh? So that's gonna be complicated. So what I don't know off the top of my head is so query folding is a requirement for incremental refresh. My first question also would be, if you're doing incremental refresh, you're doing import, which is good, instead of trying to do direct query. But I don't know that that's going to be supported on that data type. I'd have to try it to see what's actually going back to BW from the BEX standpoint. So yeah, that's gonna be a challenge.
Anything with that before?
The other thing I
have
know,
to test it out.
yeah, I'd have to test it. But the other thing I know from working on the HANA side is that sometimes the data type items are kind of wonky. That's a technical term.
Yep.
And so the mix between Power BI and what SAP is doing sometimes can be a challenge. Like I know there was one HANA item I was working on with someone for direct query, and like all the dates were coming back as a string data type from SAP, and then when we got into the Power BI side of it, it was like this weird data type mismatch. So that's something to look at too, is to verify like, okay, are the data types actually like a date time of some sort that we can work with from that perspective. But the query folding is going to be the biggest thing. Assuming those things all line up, it should work.
I mean, and Chris Webb's got some blog. Chris Webb wrote a blog post, and some other people wrote I forget who the person was, about creating some functions to do some interesting thing with incremental refresh. You should go and
the challenge there is the
look.
SAP side though. That always introduces a level of
another layer.
Yeah.
Another layer.
So yeah, good luck. Yeah. And then Anna, thank you for becoming a supporter, much appreciated. And VJ, thank you for the super chat, buddy. That is much appreciated. All right, Nick, what's the best practice for DevOps repos and Power BI? So there's no direct integration today. When I've talked to a few people on this, so if you're not familiar with Azure DevOps, and then they've got like Git repos as part of that for source control and things of that nature. So I have worked with some people where they put the PBIX in the repo, and then in terms of deployment, you could do PowerShell to republish the PBIX to the workspace. That'll cover the report and the data set. It will overwrite what's there, but all the code should still be the same for the reports and whatnot. So really, I would look at just PowerShell integration for that, because there's no direct integration today for DevOps with Power BI. So the other challenge you're going to have is if you're actually taking advantage of like the deployment pipeline feature in Power BI. So you could use PowerShell to deploy to the dev workspace from a deployment pipeline perspective, but then you get into the catch of there's no API to actually trigger the push from dev to test and test to prod, and or to update the published app from a workspace. So there are some API limitations. There are gaps today in terms of that. So just be aware of that. The biggest thing is just you can publish the PBIX from a PowerShell perspective. Cool.
Yep.
All right. All right, Patrick, this one's for you. What's the best practice for including disconnected tables in the model for your users? Without cluttering up the model, we could really do with folders for tables. Ooh, yeah, that'd be good.
That would be good.
Yeah,
that
folders would be good for tables.
What's
Ideas.powerbi.com.
What's the purpose of the disconnected tables also? But folders would be great.
Yes.
Folders would be great. I would adopt the naming standard. That's about the naming convention for those disconnected user tables, right? I would prefix them with something so they're all kind of in the same place. That's about the best I could offer right now, so they know, hey, these are all my tables for whatever you're trying to do with those user tables, and then keep all the other tables, below it or above it or something like that.
Yep.
That's probably what I would do.
Yep. Good question.
Yeah, that was a good question.
All right. So I'm gonna.
I like that question.
You like it?
I did. I liked it. It kind of made me feel good.
All right, Christian's got a question here. What would be the best way to avoid the blank relationship values, meaning on an ongoing basis to see when a new dimension value is present in the data?
That's a for me, that's part of your ETL. That's not a Power BI thing, right?
Yep.
That is part of your
Data
the process
quality.
of loading your data. And so you can there's products out there that could do it, or you can make it like a whenever I'm designing the data warehouse, I have a validation process that checks for those missing values. A lot of times you can implement late arriving values. I forget the term that Kimball uses for late arriving dimension values or
It's
something like that.
slowly
And when
changing dimensions, or
no, it's not slowly changing. Inferred or deferred or something like that.
Yeah.
And after I run my data warehouse load, I run a validation check, and so I have an unknown row. Instead of when I load a fact table, instead of associating that value, right? And I run a validation process afterwards and produce a report. And you produce a report that you can look at that says, hey, look, I have these violations in my data warehouse. If you implement your data warehouse with foreign key constraints, it won't happen, right?
Yeah.
But we know some technologies don't afford that capability, and so you'd have to write your own validation process.
yeah. And Patrick talked about this in his blanks video, but Michael also made the comment of, you could have a card in your report to count blanks. So blanks, depending on, like, that's usually where that referential issue comes into play. So that's a way you could do it from a report perspective, or you could do what Patrick was showing earlier and look at it from a DAX perspective to look at some of the DMVs and whatnot to do that. But again, that's after the fact. And so if you've already in that spot from a report perspective, then something happened on your ETL process that caused that. So you may want to go back and look at the ETL side of it.
It's like metadata. You're tracking information about your data warehouse, and you can make Power BI reports for this. And somebody made a point here. It scrolled past it too fast. Was you can make a report that when those violations exist, you can set a card on your dashboard and set an alert, and it'll let you know, hey, you got an RI violation. So there's lots of ways to do this. You just
that's good.
you can get creative with it. Yeah.
All right. Let's go back to the queue. And I'm trying to pick out.
It's Saturday. It's Saturday. It's Saturday.
It is Saturday. All right. So Mike Kubi had a question here. Can you connect to a data set and a data flow at the same time, or do I have to wait for the composite models? Yes, you have to wait.
Gotta wait for the composite.
So today, if you're doing a live connect to a data set, you're kind of locked in today. So that new composite models update that's coming later this year, that will enable you to bring in import data alongside of that, so that you can enhance or enrich your model. So yeah, you got to wait for that. Good question.
There's lots of conversation. There are lots.
I know.
Of
I've been
conversations
seeing the
going on
chat's
in this
bananas.
chat.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. So Fahad had a question here. This is a good question. Can Power BI work with single sign-on? Yes, depending on the data source. Some data sources support it, some don't. And there's also other caveats that could come into play. Some of this, if it's like an on-premise source, then you're going to get into the world of Kerberos, which excites me. But there you can do single sign-on through direct query with Kerberos, so that can work. From an import standpoint, there's not that concept because you're usually importing from a single person's or a single login for the data set. However, there is a gateway setting out there that you can use Kerberos for direct query and import. So that way you don't have to hard code a username and password for the data source. And it will just use whoever the owner of the data set is in that case, and will impersonate that user. For direct query, though, yes, there is single sign-on support for usually the relational data sources. Things to consider, and I had this conversation earlier this week with someone, is If you're looking to do like single sign-on with like Azure SQL Database or Azure Synapse Analytics, that works by default. So we will pass or Power BI passes the user account. So the Azure AD token that will go to Azure Synapse or Azure SQL Database. However, if you're going through a gateway because you're inside of a VNet or Power BI doesn't directly connect to that, if you're going through a gateway, single sign-on won't work for that because it won't pass the Azure AD token through. So that's something to be aware of. So there's caveats there in some locations depending on your scenario. Good question though.
Yeah, that was a good question.
All right, a couple more. Let me know if you see one, Patrick.
They're
that you would
scrolling
like
by
to
so
answer.
fast, man.
I know. Let's see. Will, I saw a question from Will. Do you recommend admins disable the ability for users to create enterprise gateways themselves? Does this preclude them from creating a personal gateway to any other considerations? So, good question. There's a couple different ways to think about this in terms of how you want to define your just deployment of Power BI in general. I do see some of the larger enterprises, I do see them lock down the gateways, the enterprise gateways, and then they end up controlling it through the admin team. Mainly because if you don't do that, you could end up with a lot of sprawl and a lot of duplication of like data sources and gateways, and that can get a little out of control. So with inside of the Power Platform Admin Center, you can restrict who can actually deploy and manage those gateways. So not everyone can actually go do that. You can do that, control that through a security group. So maybe it's not restricted to just the Power BI admins, but you have a set of folks that you're like, yes, you guys can go create enterprise gateways. One of the things I've seen or heard ask as a feature request, and I think there's an ideas item out there for it, is the ability to allow people to administer their own data sources, but not the gateway itself, right? So be able to update the settings or passwords for those data sources so that it relieves some of the burdens on the admins. Because otherwise, and I've seen some where they've got, 20, 30 gateways, and those gateways end up having up to like 90 data sources, and like trying to manage all of that is a challenge. And so that's something to consider as well. For the personal gateway, you can also block personal gateway distribution. It's not available through the UI of the Power Platform Admin Center, but you can do it from a PowerShell perspective. So you can actually just block people from being able to install personal gateways. The challenge with that is that it doesn't stop existing personal gateways from working. It just prevents further deployment of personal gateways. So that's something that's available as well. So hopefully that answers that. It's a good question. All right.
That's a good
what do we got?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark Walton.
Yeah.
I thank Mark Walton for
Yep.
1999.
All right. Let's see here. So let's go with Christian. I have copied tiles to different workspaces using the REST API. Awesome. But I lose the report link. Any way to link the tile to the new report in the destination? So those tiles are generated from the existing dashboard that are then linked to the report. One thing I'd have to look at is when you do the clone of the tile, is if you can also specify the URL location in that clone. So I haven't looked at that personally. Let me just real quick. Let's see. Dashboards, clone tile. Yeah, let me go to my machine real quick. So for the dashboard clone tile, group tile ID, you can define the target report ID as part of that. So that should allow you to change like which report it's going to do. So I don't know if you were specifying target report ID as part of the request body. And you can change what those items are. So that should do it, hopefully. So I don't know if that's what you were doing though. So something to look at. All right, let's do one more. So DIMs and facts. Here we go. Can we use Azure Key Vault to pass service account credentials? Negative. Today there's no integration on the Power BI side with Azure Key Vault. Ideas.powerbi.com. Today there's not, from a data source credential perspective, there's not a way to do that. So,
No.
good question. Good question. Actually, so we got time for one more. Sweet.
You can do one more.
One more. One more.
You can do one more.
There was one I saw, but now I'm not seeing it. All right, I'm gonna pick Christopher.
There's so
here.
many of them, man.
I know. I have copied tiles to different. Oh, I already did that one. I didn't remove
You
it.
did that one
My
already.
bad. One more. All right. Let's do Lola. Is there a way by which I can use RLS on one report to let users from a higher hierarchy view report from the viewpoint of someone from a lower hierarchy, like principal viewing different subjects?
With the
So you can
new page
do-
navigations.
But it's not
Yeah,
just
yeah,
page
go ahead.
navigation. So I'm thinking of like the pathing option when you have a given hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, if you have a manager and then employees, you could set up like a mask and use the path DAX function to actually traverse that. So you could say, look, the manager can see all the data from the employees, but the employee can't see other employees or the manager, right? I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah. So you have to set up your RLS that way to use path.
Right.
And so it'll traverse the hierarchy, but you got to set it up.
Yep. Cool. All right, guys. I know there were a lot of questions, and we didn't have a whole lot of time today. We did the report review up first, and so we got through as many questions as we could. Thank you so much for hanging in there. We will be back next Saturday, and we'll hopefully get through a lot more questions. So thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us, and we hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah.
right.
See you guys.
Love you guys.